as I'm sure you know, millions of books on the Second World War, and we were, in fact, surprised when we went to our publishers, Macmillan's, and suggested that we produce yet another book. But they actually said that nobody had done quite what we planned to do, which was to take 9 diarists and to interweave their stories throughout the war, slightly like a novel. So, with the publisher prepared to back the book, we sat down to trying to find out who would be those best 9 diarists to select. And we needed 9 diarists that wrote well. Not everybody writes well. I write a diary sometimes and it's not very well written. And we needed diarists who wrote throughout the war. A lot of people began the war with writing a diary, and it went on for so long that they didn't continue. We decided that we would restrict ourselves to British diarists, so Britons living either here or abroad, or non-British people living here, because what we wanted to do was to create a snapshot of the Second World War in Britain. We wanted characters who could tell you the macro story, and then of course what's terribly important, the micro story. Now Christopher, who's one of the other editors, and I have a background in broadcasting, and we both produced an animated feature film of the life of Jesus some time ago now, and we realised that it didn't matter that you knew what happened. So everybody knew that story. Everyone said, well, it's not much of a film if you know what the ending is. What we realised was, it doesn't matter that you know that the Second World War ended. What matters is that you involve your audience in those dramatic choices that people had to make along the way when they didn't know what was going to happen. So we thought we better have some decision makers, the people who had the responsibility of the world on their shoulders. So we went for a soldier, and it was Chris's favourite, somebody who's always hero worshipped, called Alan Brooke, who was at the top of the chain of command, became the chief of the general staff. Then we thought we'd have a politician. We went for somebody who was against appeasing Hitler and was therefore on his list. So if he'd invaded, he would have been one of the first people to round up. That was Harold Nicholson. And then we strangely thought, well, we'll have somebody who's a little bit outside. So we went for a Canadian diplomat who could see us from the outside. He's called Charles Ritchie.
Clive.
Charles. And then, of course, to make it dramatic, we needed some people who had perhaps the most to lose. And in my mind, those were the mothers and fathers of young children who were wondering what kind of world were their children going to inherit. Would it be a German world? We didn't know. They didn't know. So we tried to cover the country, or the UK. We went for a novelist, Naomi Mitchison, who was a socialist come gentry farmer in Scotland at the time, who is pregnant with her 6th child. We went for Vera Brittain, the famous author, but also because she was a pacifist. And she sends her children away to America for safety. They're very young at the time, I think 9 and 6. And she thinks she can do that because she does regular lecture tours in America. She'll be able to see them often. She and her husband will both be able to see them. And what she doesn't know is as soon as she sent them, the British government bans her from travel because she's a pacifist. So she spends most of the war without her children. Her children are growing up, they can't remember who Mummy is. Then we went for a temporary insurance clerk, George. He has his newborn baby in the Blitz and another baby on the way. So he's just seeing life, he becomes a housing officer. Somebody whose life is really quite ordinary. He writes beautifully well. He was also a novelist in his spare time. And then another mother in the comparative safety of the West Country. She's called Anne Garnett, and she didn't expect to be caught up in the horror of war there. She thought she'd just do her bit by growing food for the land, food for everybody, and she finds that she's responsible for finding houses for all those families who are bombed and have bombed out of the cities. So suddenly she sees the terrible devastation that they've experienced. And then, of course, we wanted to be as close as possible to people who were risking their lives, the soldiers and airmen, but they weren't allowed to write diaries. Alan Brooke, who's at the top, he ignored this rule. But they weren't allowed to, so we've gone for 2 people who were very close to soldiers. We went to the mother of a prisoner of war. She's called Clara Milburn, and she's a Coventry housewife. And we went for the wife of a prisoner of war. She's called Hermione Ramfley, and her husband is captured in the desert and she's already out of the Middle East with him, and she vows not to leave the Middle East until he's returned. So there you are, the scene is set.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
Vera Brittain, a leading pacifist campaigner and the mother of Baroness Shirley Williams. Mr. Chamberlain's voice sounded old and trembled, and suddenly, as I sat on the camp bed in the study, listening between the two children, I found that the tears were running down my cheeks. I suppose from some subconscious realization of the failure of my efforts for peace over 20 years. Poppy, Shirley, hugged me and all but licked my face like a puppy.
Friday, May 17th. At 12:40 the telephone rings. I lift the receiver and wait without hearing anything. Then after about 2 minutes silence, a voice says, "Mr. Nicholson?" I say yes. "Please hold on, the Prime Minister wishes to speak to you." Another long pause, and then Winston's voice, "Harold, I think it would be very nice if you joined the government and helped Duff Cooper at the Ministry of Information." There is nothing I should like better. "Well, fall in tomorrow. The list will be out tonight. That all right?" "Very much all right." "Okay," says Winston, and rings off.
So just tell us about what you remember being. There was the dance floor, people were dancing, and then what happened?
Well, we'd just all been on the dance floor, and luckily we were eating upstairs, and we'd gone up to have our dinner, and then all hell was let loose, and it was awful darkness everywhere, and I can remember sort of feeling all my limbs to see that they were all there, because we never quite knew if they were shot off, and that was all right.
Were there a lot of people killed?
We were all right, there were about 10 of us, and the tables round about when the lights eventually came on, they weren't quite so lucky. There were a lot of people killed, and well, we were just told to get out, or helped out as it were.